Okay, it's a appointed hour. I will call to order the July 30th meeting of the Oklahoma City Riverfront Redevelopment Authority. Item 2 is from the chairman. David, is Doug coming? There he is.
Already on deck?
Right on cue. Item 2, item from the chairman. I have asked Doug to quickly present the slides from his presentation on the MAPS 4 proposals, as only the ones that dealt with the river, for those of you that might have missed his presentation or hadn't seen it so far. So, and again, these are just the ones from the river enhancements, not his entire park presentation. So,
darn it. Doug Cupper, Director of Parks and Recreation. For your, again, your edification, most of these came from you all in the first place. Your land use committee put together a list of activities that you wanted to recommend to the mayor, and that letter went to the mayor, and some of these obviously came directly from you all. This is a map of the river. It's quite an extensive area of the river corridor that you operate on, that you manage for the citizens of Oklahoma City. Starting at stage right, the left-hand side, if you're looking at it, or the far right-hand side, the low water dam. We wanted to make a pool of water beyond the Native American Center, beyond the Dallas Junction and things along those lines. So as people pass through that section of the city, they're not looking down at the rubble or the pipelines that are crossing the river right there. We want to make a body of water out of it. It's just going to be basically, the anticipated plan is a reflection pool, basically. We're not going to change that last dam to be one that has dikes or lock systems on it. The river cruisers won't go any further than they go now. We just want to have it a little bit more attractive for that corridor, kind of a beautification to the gateway of the city. We've always anticipated the need for a pedestrian bridge in the zone of the American Indian Museum because we want to be able to connect the North Trail, River Trail, with the South River Trail in this area to make it more accessible. So that one was on your list for a pedestrian bridge. One of the things that came in from outside of this group was a possible riverside amphitheater on the North Shore there. Again, it's a simple type of environment, not, fixed seating or things along those, probably a grassy berm, or maybe, if nothing else, some large seating rocks and then grassy berms above that. We all know that we need a river landing in that area. The committee actually recommended two landings, one in this zone and then one down further, and we'll get to that in a minute. We also talked about making sure that we do have a connection through the boathouse area to the Native American area on both sides of the river. Most of this is being planned for from 2007 GO bonds right now as we speak. But each year that we progress through that 2007, the pricing went up. So we want to make sure that we have adequate funding, and we hope that MAPS 4 can provide that level of service so we can get those trails on both sides of the river all the way through that zone. Moving back down the river, we identified that we would like to have a river landing in the vicinity of Wiley Post Park. High activity area, lots of rentals, a lot of activities going on there. We're going to be spending approximately $6 million on Wiley Post, again, out of 2007 GO bonds. Those designs are going forward as I speak. We've always anticipated a river landing there. We have had lots of conversations with Jeannie and her folks about the viability of that location for a river cruiser. They're anticipating applying for federal funds to help pay for that, but we have set that aside. We have set aside the match, or identified the match on her behalf, that we will be spending from that $6 million from 2007 GO. Which side of the river in that zone that the river landing actually gets built, there's two schools of thought, one for Wiley Post and one to support activities at Scissortail Park. Again, further conversations. We got to get maps 4 approved and things along those lines as well. And then at the far end, we have the equestrian facility that, in the middle, I'm sorry, a very important piece for y'all is we want to make the river property that you have on the west side of Western available for building. We want to make it building ready in that area, west side of Western on the North Shore, and then the far end is the equestrian, and we can go on to the photographs. Obviously, the boat landings, you know what they look like. This is the one at typical at Meridian. I do know that according to what Jeannie has shared with us, and I'm sure she can step up and validate it, they have to cut 95 feet into the bank of the river to put these landings in. So we have to plan for that, whether it's on the North Shore or the South Shore. They got to be able to recess these to keep them out of the main channel of the river. So we've got to plan for that. This is a simple amphitheater, as I was speaking, down there on the north side, across from the Native American Museum. Again, simple. It's not going to be one of those places that we're going to ask 10,000 people to cram into. Just simple opportunities, you know, for some form of, especially in the Native American area, corn dances and things along those lines that they might have and want to exhibit their native culture in this location, or from a programming standpoint, other opportunities to go in there. You know, this obviously is not our river, but it depicts a pedestrian bridge across the river. We don't know what extent that is. We know it's going to have to be about a 400-foot free span, depending on where it's going to be placed, because we can't impact the rowing course on the river in that zone. And that's it. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Doug? Obviously, this falls into a long list of projects that I'm not sure. Have you been keeping a run on total, what we're up to yet?
It's moving.
Yes, yes. But again, it's some of the ones that we talked about for us to put in for the river. So, Doug, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Item 3 is the minutes from the June 18th meeting. Do we have any changes or corrections?
Move approval.
Second.
Cast your vote. It passes unanimously. Item 4 is a consent docket. We have the oil and gas revenue report, the river corridor events update, and a new item. Item C is a quarterly Boathouse Foundation performance report. In the recent agreement with the Boathouse Foundation that restructured their board and some other things, they were required to present a quarterly performance report. This is going to be the avenue for that. They'll present it to us. It will be on our agenda, and then it'll move forward to the city manager's office. So, any questions on those? Motion on the consent docket?
So moved.
Cast your vote. Passes unanimously. Item 5 is the primary agenda items. We have a river maintenance projects update.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Trustees. Jim Llewellyn, Public Works Department. The first item on our dredging, sedimentation basin dredging. They were slowed down by the heavy rains we had earlier, but since the rains have stopped, they've been able to resume operations. They've been moving quite a bit of debris out, or sediment out. Currently, they're at about 42,000 cubic yards. We anticipate they're going to use the original allocated 1.5 million within the next 2 weeks. We had allocated 500,000 for next year's dredging, but because of the amount of sediment in there, we've upped that to $1 million. There's still a lot of sediment in that basin. Scadia, there's no significant issues. River maintenance, we replaced 36 tons of riprap in the western basin. These were areas that were damaged by the high water flows we had earlier this year. Crews also removed 131 tons of debris, primarily from the western basin. but they did find 36 tons in the eastern basin, which is a little unusual. They're monitoring debris on the river and looking at riprap damage. We anticipate there'll be a lot more repairs to the riprap in the future. Probably the biggest item recently is those heavy flows brought a lot of sediment down and have filled in the cut there on the Meridian Landing and blocking riverboat access on that. We're looking at ways to get that dredged. We've been investigating trying to find a floating dredge that could go in there and clean that out while maintaining the river level, but we're not having a lot of success on that. Our backup plan would be wait till this fall when river operations cease, lower that basin and go in with heavy equipment, clean that out. That's the end of my report. Is there any questions?
Any questions? Does that, maybe this is for Jeannie, does that mean we're not picking up passengers at the Meridian Landing currently?
That's correct. We are just running, many days we are just running from Exchange to Regatta and back because we also have issues with debris in Bricktown Landing. But we're pretty much, Meridian Landing is unavailable with the debris. We had a captain try to go up there on, I believe it was June 26th, excuse me, and he nearly grounded the boat. When he first felt the grounding of the boat, he backed away, and we've not been back.
Good.
We lowered the water level in that basin 3 feet earlier this week so that we could survey the extent of the debris or the extent of the sediment, and it pretty well filled in that whole basin. We looked at options to remove it, but there's just a lot of sediment in there, and it's going to take a fairly major operation to get that out. But like I said, we'll have funding for it.
So it's just not around the landing, it's basically the whole basin that's got a problem with sediment?
Well, not so much the whole basin. When the sediment was going downstream, as long as it's in the channel, it has enough velocity, it keeps it moving. But like they referenced, they have those 95 or 90-foot cuts into the bank, where it's recessed there. Well, in those areas, the water velocity slows and allows that sediment to fall out. A lot of the issue on this is due to the fact that the sediment basin upstream was full, and we've been removing sediment out of that. But normally, if it was at its normal level, it would catch most of that sediment before it comes downstream. Now, with the rains we had this spring, I don't know that it would have caught all of this, but it would have helped the situation. I mean, this is the first time we've had an issue this significant in the 20 years that we've had the low water dams on the river. But so I have to kind of attribute it to the rainfall events we had this spring, but the sediment basin was also a contributing factor to it too.
Okay. Any other questions?
Is there a timeline to where that sediment can be removed so that we can start using the Bricktown and Meridian Landing again?
In order to take it out with heavy equipment, we would have to drain that basin. I talked to Jeannie about it a little bit about, her boat operations, and, originally I was looking at probably doing it sometime in November, but either way, we'd want to wait until after, spring and summer rains have passed and probably get into it sometime this fall. But like I said, because of the riverboat operations, I was looking at possibly November. But if there's an opportunity to move it up, we'll probably pursue that.
Motion to receive that report?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much.
Passes unanimously. Item B is to receive an update on proposed sanitary sewer improvements for Manuel Perez Park, 21 Southeast 17th.
Good afternoon. Brandon Boydson, Oklahoma City Parks. Just as a real quick item of coordination and update, we've been working with the Utilities Department on coordinating the location of where this new sewer line goes through some of our parklands, and thought you all might like to know this is also crossing through a few spots of the River Trust land. And so on the map you can see it's where the nice pink magenta line is. That's a new, very large sewer line that the Utility Department is working to construct. And right now, the tentative schedule is the start of construction will be sometime after the 1st of September. So,
Any questions on that? Okay. Motion to receive that update?
So moved.
Cast your vote. Passed unanimously. Item C is the quarterly River Cruisers update. Jeannie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and trustees. Well, you've already heard the bad news. I put a copy of the Okie Comics issue that featured Oklahoma River cruises. It was a reasonably priced, fairly inexpensive ad, and in addition, they ran a short article for us, and we were really happy to see that, something to give out to the patrons that ride the boats, and these are placed in various locations around the city to help promote what we do. So this is a picture from May 31st. The river at this point is going 4,700 cubic feet per second. Normal, mind you, is under 500. We already talked about the consequence of the shoaling at Meridian. If you'll just click once. That area right there, that is the gate that is normally left completely closed to avoid any eddy when our our river cruisers are exiting the lock. You'll see water is coming over it, and quite a bit of debris is piled up on top of it. So this was a major event. This is 4,700. It got as high as 10,300, and the water was cresting 3 feet above the gates at that point. So it was an event we've never seen before. I got this from the U.S. Geological Survey website. This is the flow rate just below Overholser, the North Canadian River, which is, of course, where the Oklahoma River begins. The green line is our safe operating flow rate at 1,800 cubic feet per second. The purple line there is the normal rate, the historical average, which is 475, and then the blue line is the rate that happened during the month of May, where it got as high as 10,300. Where the blue line is between, those are the only days we could operate. So during May, we had 6 operating days. In June, we had 7. The blocks at the bottom are the Monday, Tuesday dates when we don't normally operate anyway. So once again, this was something we've never seen in the 12, 13 years that we've been doing boat operations, to see this much river flow. Consequence of that, of course, is lower ridership. It wasn't really as bad as it could have been, considering the few days that we were able to operate. We did have a lot of canceled trips. Again, historically high number of canceled trips. Our charters were fine. Charters are just about on target with what they normally are. We normally do between 100 and 120 charters per year, because nearly every charter wants to go on a Friday or Saturday. So, given 52 weekends, do the math. Mother's Day and Father's Day, we were able to operate. I'm sorry, not Father's Day. Father's Day flow rate was too high. Mother's Day and these charters, we just conducted within the basin, within that western basin. No lock transit. We just handed people passes. They could come back and go through the locks on a later day. So it didn't impact our charters, and it didn't impact our specialty cruises. Mother's Day was a sellout. It was a great event. Father's Day, we did have to cancel. The flow rate was just too high to even stay in the western basin. Cocktail cruises are selling extremely well. Fridays and Saturdays, 6:30 and 8:30, June through September, and they are doing extremely well. This is it's a lower price point. We just dropped the food, which was getting higher and higher in cost, and it was becoming price prohibitive because of what we had to pay for the catering. So we thought, well, let's try it without the catering, and it sells just as well. And I think it's actually a slightly higher profit margin. And then we're already booking people for Haunt the River. It's already about 10% sold through, and it's not until October, so we're pretty happy about that. Finally, the Spokies Bike Share program, we moved one of our bike share stations to Riversport. so that people can rent a bike and ride up and down the river trail. For $9, they can ride 3 hours up and down the river trail, or they can check it out for $1 and just pay 12 cents a minute to ride. In the first week, we had 28 rides, checkouts from this location. That's just checkouts. People can also ride from, say, the ballpark or one of our other stations and ride actually to River Sport. So it becomes a way for people, perhaps even athletes staying in the Bricktown area, to be able to get to and from without having to walk or take alternate transportation. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Jeannie? Motion to receive that? Passes unanimously. Thank you, Jeannie. Item D is a resolution approving financial participation in the amount of $25,000 from the Riverfront Redevelopment Authority in the sales and marketing plan for the river cruisers, and then authorizing that transfer to COTPA. This is a yearly item that we do in their marketing plan. Any questions?
Approval.
Cast your vote. Passes unanimously. Item E is to receive the Redevelopment Authority schedule of cash receipts and disbursements for the period ending June 30th. Questions? Cast. Approved unanimously. Item S, to receive correspondence from Allen, Gibbs, and Hulick LC regarding our 2018-2019 audit, our yearly audit. Any questions on it? Passes unanimously. Item G is the revised rules, regulations, and policies for the North Canadian River Corridor Recreation Area. We introduced these on last month, June 18th, and it's set for approval today. Kathy, did your committee receive any comments or changes to be made? Are we ready to go with this?
We did not receive any comments or changes, so the committee recommends that we vote on this as is.
Any comments from any citizens?
Second.
Cast your vote. It passes unanimously. Item H is an ordinance related to general schedule of fees, repealing numerous things. This was, again, introduced June the 18th and set for recommendation today. This revises the fee structure for the river. I'll remind you that what it did was really shortened up the whole thing to make it coincide with the fee schedule that's already published in the city anyway, and referenced that fee schedule many times in there. So did you have any on that one?
The committee recommends that you pass this, the fee structure.
Okay. Motion?
So moved.
Passes unanimously. Item I is a joint resolution terminating the lease agreement dated November 24th, 2015 between the Riverfront Redevelopment Authority and City Care for Crystal Lake Park. We talked about this last month, and we're still on track. I believe City Care has indicated they'll keep mowing for the remainder of this mowing season. Is that still correct, Doug? But the lease itself is going to be terminated. So, any questions on that?
Second.
It passes unanimously. Item J is to receive a revocable permit with In Motive, Oklahoma for Hotter 5K on July 26th using Wiley Post Park. Any questions? Motion?
Second.
Passes unanimously. Item K is to another permit with the same group for the hottest 5K. I don't know which one is going to be the hottest, but this one's on August the 9th.
Move approval.
And it passes unanimously. Item L is to recommend that the City Council approve a revocable permit with Tyler Media Group for Jake Jam and Z-Fest August 17, 18 using Manuel Perez Park, Matt Hoffman Sports Park, Zone 3 of the river and Wiley Post Park and Pavilion and Event Center. And it passes unanimously. Item 6 is a claims docket. Any questions on that? Motion? Passes unanimously. Item 7 is additional items, comments by staff. Doug, anything other than what's in your written report?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Doug Cupper again for the record. One thing that I wanted to add, it just happened since we published the agenda. The spring rains have done a major number, as we heard Jim talk about and Jeannie talk about it. Probably most of the sediment in Jeannie's basin came from one of our riverbanks that is now jeopardizing the West River Trail. What you have before you, the red line, is where we anticipate putting out notifications that the West River Trail between those points is going to be closed due to erosion. We are trying to get out on the perimeter so we can identify where bikers might come in contact with an easier way to get off the trail system and possibly onto the road grid system to be able to either finish their commute downtown or they can make the decision to turn around and go back the way that they went. We don't want to get them into no man's land where they have to go back, 4 miles to find some access to the road. We want to try to get that information out to them ahead of time. We will have soft closures at 2 locations out on the perimeters. We plan on signing it, warning them of the issue, and putting plastic snow fence up in those areas. Again, they have been knocking our barriers down and turning the signs upside down out there on the trail system, but we're going to try to make a soft closing at those locations where we're suggesting people get off the trail, and then we will have hard points just before coming east or west, depending on your mode of transportation. We will have hard points with chain link fencing secured to keep people from going out on the trail that is now undercut by the river erosion, making it an unsafe point to utilize the West River Trail. This will be hitting the media today or tomorrow morning. I found it advantageous that we were having the River Trust meeting today to make you aware of it, since I know that you don't have any responsibility for this, but it is on your lands that you operate for the citizens of Oklahoma City. Be happy to answer any questions either from the report or from the closure that I've presented to you today.
So what's the long-term plan with regards to closure, repair, et cetera?
Well, we're going to try to get Jim Llewellyn to bring all that silt back over and pile it back up against that shoreline. That's the major issue. In 10 years, we lost something like 150 feet of riverbank right at that point. So it's not going to be an easy task. Whether we can get permission from Corps of Engineers to fix that point, something's going to have to be done. Otherwise, the gentleman who owns the trucking firm adjacent to our trail right there is going to start losing his real estate. We are looking at ways to reroute that particular section of the trail. Again, not an easy fix because we'll probably have to acquire right-of-way and things along those lines to do that. So once we have a little bit, we just made this decision. We are pulling up the engineers' reports from when the West River Trail was built originally, see what they identified. We're going to engage that firm to help us possibly come up with a solution, but that'll take a little bit of time. So we're going to have to ask the citizens. It's going to be on our web. There is a website where you can go on and see what's happening on our trail system. So we'll keep that up to date and keep that refreshed. But it's not going to be a simple task. It's not going to be a short duration type of scenario.
Any other questions for Doug? Motion on accepting his report?
Thank you.
Passed unanimously. Any comments by trustees? I will say that, and normally Mike Knopf's here, I was going to ask him about it, but there was as a member of the Boathouse Foundation Board, I received an email that last weekend was their largest participation weekend they've had since they've opened. And they expect this coming weekend to be even larger, so